If you look at the world today, one of the biggest changes happening quietly but powerfully is how people think about religion, belief, and meaning in life. For most of human history, religion was not just a personal choice, it was the center of everything. It shaped laws, culture, education, family life, and even the way people understood the universe. A person was usually born into a religion and stayed in it for life, not because they carefully studied all options, but because there were no alternatives around them. Imagine a small village hundreds of years ago where everyone believed the same thing, followed the same rituals, and trusted the same religious leaders. In that kind of environment, belief felt natural and unquestioned, almost like breathing. But today, that situation has completely changed, and this change is one of the biggest reasons why secularism and atheism are growing. Now, think about how much access people have to information. A young person sitting in a small town can open their phone and instantly learn about different religions, philosophies, scientific discoveries, and even criticisms of their own beliefs. This exposure creates a very important shift in thinking. Instead of asking, "Is my religion true?" people begin asking, "Why is my religion true and others are not?" This question alone can shake the foundation of inherited belief. For example, a person born into a Muslim family in Pakistan, a Christian family in Brazil, and a Hindu family in India will all grow up believing their religion is true. But when they start interacting online and see that all of them are equally confident, it creates confusion. It raises a deeper question that many people struggle with. If truth is one, why are there so many different beliefs? This is often the first step toward doubt, and doubt is often the first step toward either deeper faith or complete disengagement. Now add another layer to this situation, which is education. Modern education teaches people how to question, analyze, and look for evidence. It trains the mind to not accept things blindly. This is very different from traditional systems where authority was rarely questioned. For instance, in a classroom, students are encouraged to ask why and how, and they are rewarded for critical thinking. Over time, this habit does not stay limited to school subjects. It spreads into personal beliefs as well. A student who learns how to question a scientific theory or a historical claim may also start questioning religious teachings. This does not automatically make them atheist, but it changes the way they approach belief. Faith becomes something that must be understood and justified, not just inherited. Another powerful factor is science. In the past, many natural events were explained through religion. Thunder, disease, earthquakes, and even the movement of stars were often linked to divine actions. But as science developed, it started providing clear and testable explanations for these things. For example, diseases that were once thought to be punishment or mystery are now understood through biology and medicine. Weather patterns are explained through atmospheric science. The origin of the universe is studied through physics and cosmology. When people see that natural explanations work consistently and can be tested, they start relying more on them. This does not mean religion is completely replaced, but it reduces the role religion plays in explaining the world. Over time, this creates a mental shift where people depend less on supernatural explanations and more on observable reality. Another important change is the idea of personal freedom. In the past, leaving a religion or even questioning it could lead to serious consequences like social rejection, loss of family ties, or even punishment. Today, especially in many parts of the world, people have more freedom to believe or not believe. This freedom changes everything. When belief is no longer forced or socially required, it becomes optional. And when something becomes optional, people start evaluating it. Some stay, some switch, and some leave completely. For example, in many Western countries, it is now completely normal for someone to say they do not follow any religion, and this does not stop them from having a job, friends, or a normal life. This kind of environment makes it easier for secular ideas to spread. Also, modern life itself is very different. People are busier, more focused on careers, and more connected to global culture than local traditions. Religion, which once structured daily life, now competes with many other priorities like work, entertainment, and social media. A person might spend hours online, watching videos, learning new skills, or interacting with people from different cultures, leaving less time and emotional energy for religious practices. Slowly, religion moves from being the center of life to just one part of it, and for some people, it disappears completely. All of these changes together create a powerful shift. It is not that people suddenly decide to reject religion for no reason, but rather they're living in a world that constantly exposes them to new ideas, encourages questioning, and offers alternative ways to understand life. This is why secularism and atheism are growing, not as a single movement, but as the result of many deep and connected changes in society. One of the most powerful reasons behind the rise of secularism and atheism today is the changing relationship people have with religious institutions, not just religion itself. It is very important to understand this difference, because many people are not actually rejecting the idea of God or spirituality. They're rejecting organized systems that claim to represent it. In the past, religious institutions were among the most trusted parts of society. They were seen as sources of truth, morality, guidance, and even justice. A priest, imam, monk, or religious scholar was not just a teacher of faith, but often a respected authority in the entire community. People would go to them not only for religious advice, but also for personal problems, social issues, and even political matters. This level of trust created a strong connection between individuals and religion, because questioning the institution often felt like questioning truth itself. But in the modern world, this trust has weakened significantly, and this shift plays a major role in why people are moving away from organized religion. One major reason for this decline in trust is the exposure of scandals and misconduct within religious institutions. In different parts of the world, there have been serious cases involving abuse, corruption, and misuse of power. For example, the global abuse crisis within the Catholic Church shocked millions of people. When such incidents come to light, especially in institutions that claim moral authority, they create deep disappointment and anger. People begin to question how an institution that teaches right and wrong could be involved in such actions. This does not just damage the reputation of individuals involved, it affects the credibility of the entire system. Many people, especially younger generations, respond to this by distancing themselves completely, not just from the institution, but sometimes from religion altogether. Another reason is the perception of hypocrisy. Many individuals feel that religious leaders or institutions do not always practice what they preach. For example, when leaders talk about simplicity and humility but live in luxury, or when they speak about compassion but support harsh social attitudes, it creates a disconnect. People notice these contradictions more easily today because of media and the internet. A single video, report, or story can reach millions within minutes. This level of transparency means that mistakes and inconsistencies are no longer hidden. As a result, people start to rely less on institutional authority and more on their own judgment. Over time, this weakens the influence of organized religion in their lives. There's also the issue of religion being mixed with politics. In many countries, religious institutions or leaders are closely connected to political power. Sometimes religion is used to influence elections, justify policies, or create division between groups. When people see religion being used as a tool for power rather than guidance, it reduces their respect for it. For instance, when political conflicts are framed in religious terms, it can lead to tension and even violence. This makes some people uncomfortable with the idea of religion being involved in public life. They begin to prefer a more neutral, secular system where decisions are based on common laws rather than religious beliefs. This shift does not necessarily mean they reject faith completely, but they no longer see organized religion as the best way to express it. Another important factor is the rise of personal identity. In the past, identity was largely collective. A person's religion, family, and community defined who they were. Today, identity is more individual. People define themselves based on their interests, values, careers, and personal experiences. Religion becomes one option among many, rather than the foundation of identity. For example, someone might identify more as a creative professional, a global citizen, or a supporter of certain social values rather than primarily as a member of a religious group. This change reduces the emotional dependence on religious institutions because people find meaning and belonging in other ways. Social media and online communities play a big role here. A person can now connect with others who share similar interests or beliefs, even if they live far away. This reduces the need for local religious communities as the main source of connection. There's also a growing trend where people separate spirituality from religion. Many individuals still believe in a higher power, the universe, or some form of spiritual reality, but they do not want to follow strict rules, rituals, or doctrines. They prefer a more flexible approach where they can choose what feels meaningful to them. For example, someone might meditate, practice mindfulness, or believe in karma without identifying with any specific religion. This approach gives them a sense of peace or purpose without the structure of organized religion. Over time, this creates a new category of people who are not atheist, but also not religious in the traditional sense. They are often described as spiritual, but not religious. This trend is especially strong among younger generations who value freedom and personal choice. Another subtle but important change is how morality is understood. In the past, religion was seen as the main source of moral guidance. People believed that without religion, society would lose its sense of right and wrong. But today, many people believe that morality can come from human values like empathy, fairness, and respect rather than religious teachings alone. For example, ideas about human rights, equality, and justice are often discussed in secular terms. People argue that you do not need religion to be a good person. This belief reduces the perceived necessity of religion in everyday life. As a result, even those who leave religion do not feel that they are losing their moral compass. All these factors together create a situation where organized religion is no longer the central authority it once was. People are not necessarily becoming less thoughtful or less concerned about meaning in life. They're simply looking for it in different places. Some turn to philosophy, some to science, some to personal spirituality, and some to human relationships. The key point is that the role of religious institutions has changed dramatically. And this change is one of the strongest drivers behind the rise of secularism and atheism in the modern world. Another very deep and often overlooked reason behind the spread of secularism and atheism is the change in economic conditions and the overall sense of security people feel in their lives. This factor is extremely important because it connects belief not just to ideas, but to everyday survival, fear, and uncertainty. To understand this, imagine two different environments. In the first one, people live with constant uncertainty. There may be poverty, lack of health care, political instability, or danger for natural disasters. In such a situation, life feels unpredictable and fragile. People do not know what will happen tomorrow, whether they will remain safe, healthy, or financially stable. In this kind of environment, religion often plays a very strong role. It provides comfort, hope, and a sense of control over things that cannot be controlled. When someone is facing hardship, prayer, faith, and belief in a higher power can give emotional strength. It creates a feeling that there is meaning behind suffering and that things may improve in the future. Now imagine a second environment where people have access to stable jobs, good health care, education, and social support systems. Life is more predictable. If someone gets sick, they can go to a hospital. If they lose a job, there may be financial support. If they face a problem, there are systems in place to help them. In this situation, the level of daily fear and uncertainty is much lower. As a result, the psychological need for religion as a source of security also decreases. This does not mean people stop believing completely, but the intensity of dependence on religion becomes weaker. Over time, this can lead to more secular thinking. This pattern can be clearly seen when comparing different parts of the world. For example, Many countries in Western Europe have high levels of economic development, strong welfare systems, and stable governments. In these societies, a large portion of the population identifies as non-religious or only loosely connected to religion. On the other hand, in regions where economic challenges are greater, religion often remains a central part of life. This does not mean that one is better than the other, but it shows how deeply belief is connected to life conditions. People are not just making philosophical choices, they are responding to their environment. Another important aspect of this is how modern systems have replaced some of the roles religion used to play. In the past, religious institutions were often responsible for education, charity, healthcare, and community support. If someone was in need, they would turn to religious groups for help. But today, many of these functions are handled by governments or independent organizations. Schools, hospitals, and social services are often secular. This reduces the practical dependence on religion in daily life. For example, if a person can receive medical treatment, education, and financial assistance without relying on a religious institution, then religion becomes less central to their survival and well-being. It shifts from being a necessity to being a personal choice. There's also a psychological side to this change. When people feel safe and secure, they tend to think differently about life. They become more focused on personal growth, self-expression, and long-term goals rather than immediate survival. This shift in mindset can lead to questioning traditional beliefs. For instance, a person who is not worried about basic needs may start thinking about deeper questions like purpose, identity, and truth. In this process, they may explore different ideas, including secular philosophies or atheism. On the other hand, when someone is struggling just to survive, they may not have the time or mental space to question deeply held beliefs. Religion in such cases provides ready-made answers and emotional support, which can be very valuable. Another interesting point is how technology and modern life reduce the sense of mystery in the world. In the past, many aspects of life were unknown and unpredictable. People did not understand why certain events happened, and this created a natural space for religious explanations. Today, with advancements in science and technology, many of these mysteries have been explained. Weather forecasts can predict storms, medical tests can diagnose diseases, and communication systems can connect people instantly across the world. This increasing control over life reduces the feeling that events are beyond human understanding. As a result, people may feel less need to rely on supernatural explanations. This does not eliminate belief, but it changes its role. Religion becomes less about explaining the world and more about personal meaning. And for some people, even that role is replaced by other sources. It is also important to consider how modern economic systems encourage independence. In many societies, individuals are expected to build their own careers, make their own choices, and take responsibility for their own lives. This culture of independence can extend to belief systems as well. People may feel that just as they choose their profession or lifestyle, they should also choose their beliefs rather than simply inherit them. This idea can lead to exploration, doubt, and sometimes rejection of traditional religion. At the same time, consumer culture and material success can also play a role. When people focus heavily on career, income, and personal achievement, religion may become less of a priority. It is not always a conscious rejection, but rather a gradual shift in attention. Life becomes centered around goals that are measurable and immediate, while spiritual questions may be pushed aside. Over time, this can lead to a more secular outlook, even if the person still identifies culturally with a religion. All these factors show that the rise of secularism and atheism is not just about ideas or arguments. It is deeply connected to how people live, what they experience, and how secure they feel in their daily lives. When life becomes more stable, predictable, and supported by modern systems, the role of religion naturally changes. For some, it becomes less central, and for others, it disappears altogether. This is why wealthier and more stable societies often see a faster growth in secular thinking, while in other parts of the world, religion remains strong and deeply rooted. Another major force driving the spread of secularism and atheism in today's world is globalization, which simply means that people, ideas, cultures, and beliefs are now more connected than ever before. This connection has changed how individuals see religion in a very deep way. In the past, most people lived their entire lives in one place, surrounded by others who believed the same things. Their religion was not just a belief system. It was part of the air they breathed, the language they spoke, the festivals they celebrated, and the values they followed. There was very little exposure to different ways of thinking, so religion felt absolute and unquestioned. But now, because of the internet, social media, travel, and global communication, people are constantly exposed to a wide variety of beliefs and lifestyles. This exposure creates a powerful psychological effect. When a person sees that there are millions of people across the world who believe something completely different, but are just as sincere, kind, and confident, it challenges the idea that only one belief system holds the truth. For example, a young person in Pakistan might watch videos of people in Japan who follow different spiritual traditions, or someone in Europe who does not believe in any religion at all, but still lives a meaningful and ethical life. This raises a natural question. If all these people are living different ways and still finding purpose, then what makes one belief the only correct one? This question does not always lead to atheism, but it often leads to doubt, and doubt can slowly move a person away from strict religious certainty. Another important aspect of globalization is the blending of cultures. Today, people are not limited to the traditions they were born into. They can adopt ideas, practices, and values from different parts of the world. For instance, someone might be born into a religious family, but also practice meditation influenced by Eastern traditions, follow scientific thinking, and support modern social values. This mixing creates a more flexible and personalized worldview. Instead of following one complete system, people pick and choose what resonates with them. Over time, this can weaken the hold of traditional religion because it is no longer the only framework through which people understand life. It becomes one option among many. Social media plays a very strong role in this process. Platforms allow people to share their thoughts, experiences, and beliefs openly. A person questioning their faith can easily find others who have gone through similar experiences. They can watch discussions, debates, and personal stories that explore religion from different angles. This creates a sense of community around questioning, which was not easily available in the past. Before, someone with doubts might feel isolated or afraid to speak up. Now, they can connect with thousands of others who are asking the same questions. This reduces the fear of leaving religion and makes the transition easier for some people. It also normalizes secular and atheist identities, making them more visible and accepted. Another effect of globalization is the spread of universal values that are not tied to any one religion. Ideas like human rights, equality, freedom of expression, and individual dignity are now discussed on a global level. These values are often presented in a secular framework, meaning they are justified based on human reasoning rather than religious authority. For example, the idea that all people should be treated equally regardless of gender, race, or background is widely accepted in many parts of the world, even among those who do not follow a religion. When people see that moral systems can exist and function without being based on a specific religion, it changes how they think about the necessity of religion in society. They may begin to believe that ethics can be built on shared human values rather than divine commands. Globalization also brings awareness of historical and cultural differences in religion. People learn that beliefs and practices have changed over time and vary from place to place. For instance, the way religion is practiced in one country may be very different from how it is practiced in another, even within the same faith. This can lead to the realization that religion is not always fixed or universal, but influenced by culture and history. For some people, this understanding weakens the idea that their version of religion is absolute and unchanging. It introduces the possibility that beliefs are shaped by human context, which can lead to a more critical view. There's also the impact of global communication on debates and discussions about religion. People are now exposed to arguments both for and against religious belief. They can watch debates between scholars, listen to podcasts, read articles, and explore different perspectives in detail. This level of access was not available in the past. While some people use this information to strengthen their faith, others find it leads them towards skepticism or atheism. The key point is that exposure increases choice, and increased choice often leads to questioning. Another subtle but important change is how globalization affects identity. In a connected world, people often see themselves as part of a larger human community rather than only a local or religious group. They may identify as global citizens, focusing on shared human experiences rather than specific traditions. This broader identity can reduce the importance of religious labels. For example, instead of saying, "I belong to this religion," a person might say, "I believe in being kind, fair, and open-minded," without tying those values to a specific religious system. Over time, this shift can lead to a more secular outlook, where religion is not the primary way of defining oneself. At the same time, it is important to note that globalization does not always reduce religion. In some cases, it can strengthen it. When people feel that their traditions are being challenged or diluted, they may hold onto them more strongly. However, overall, the increased exposure to different beliefs and ways of life tend to make people more open to questioning and less certain about absolute claims. This environment naturally supports the growth of secularism and atheism because it encourages individuals to think independently and explore multiple perspectives. All of these changes show that globalization is not just about economics or technology. It is deeply transforming how people think about truth, belief, and identity. By connecting the world, it has created a space where no single belief system can remain isolated or unquestioned. This constant exposure to diversity is one of the key reasons why more people today are moving away from traditional religion and toward more secular or individualized ways of understanding life. In the next part, we will explore how the rise of individualism and personal choice is reshaping belief systems and why many people now prefer to define their own values instead of following inherited traditions. Another powerful reason behind the rise of secularism and atheism is the shift toward individualism, which means people now see themselves as independent decision-makers rather than simply members of a group who follow inherited traditions. This change is very important because it directly affects how people approach religion. In the past, identity was mostly given, not chosen. A person was born into a family, a culture, and a religion, and these things defined who they were. Questioning them was often seen as disobedience or even betrayal. For example, if someone was born into a Muslim, Christian, or Hindu family, it was expected that they would follow that religion throughout their life. The idea of choosing a different belief or rejecting religion entirely was rare and often discouraged. But in the modern world, especially in urban and educated environments, identity has become something people actively create for themselves. They choose their careers, lifestyles, values, and even their beliefs. This shift gives individuals a sense of control and ownership over their lives, but also means that nothing is automatically accepted, including religion. One of the biggest drivers of this change is the emphasis on personal freedom. Modern societies, especially in many developed regions, promote the idea that individuals have the right to think, speak, and believe as they choose. This freedom is supported by laws, education, and cultural values. When people grow up in such an environment, they naturally start to question anything that feels imposed on them. Religion, which often comes with rules, traditions, and expectations, can sometimes feel restrictive in this context. For instance, a young person might ask why they should follow certain practices or beliefs simply because they were born into them. If they do not find convincing answers, they may start to distance themselves from religion. This process is usually gradual, not sudden. It often begins with small questions and slowly leads to a broader reevaluation of belief. Another important aspect of individualism is the idea of authenticity. People today are encouraged to be true to themselves, to follow what they genuinely believe, and feel rather than pretending to conform. This value can conflict with religious expectations when a person feels that their personal views do not fully align with traditional teachings. For example, someone might agree with some parts of their religion but struggle with others, such as certain social rules or interpretations. In an individualistic culture, they may choose to follow only what resonates with them or leave the system altogether. This creates a more flexible and personalized approach to belief, but also weakens the structure of organized religion, which usually requires a certain level of commitment and consistency. Social media and modern communication also strengthen individualism. People are constantly exposed to different lifestyles, opinions, and success stories. They see others making unique choices and being accepted or even celebrated for it. This creates a sense that it is normal to be different and to follow one's own path. For example, influencers, public figures, and content creators often share personal journeys, including their experiences with religion, doubt, or atheism. When others see these stories, they may feel more comfortable exploring their own thoughts. It reduces the fear of standing out or being judged. Over time, this environment encourages more people to think independently about religion rather than simply following tradition. Another factor is the changing role of family and community. In the past, families and local communities had a strong influence on individual beliefs. There was close monitoring of behavior, and social pressure played a big role in maintaining religious practices. Today, especially in cities, people often live more independent lives. They may move away from their families for education or work, and their daily interactions may be with colleagues or friends from different backgrounds. This reduces the direct influence of family and community on their beliefs. Without constant reinforcement, religious practices can become less consistent, and over time, belief itself may weaken. For example, someone who moves to a new city for a job might gradually stop attending religious gatherings simply because they're no longer surrounded by people who do so regularly. This does not always happen consciously, but it can lead to a more secular lifestyle. Individualism also changes how people think about truth. In traditional settings, truth was often seen as something fixed and given by authority, whether religious or cultural. In modern individualistic societies, truth is often seen as something that individuals explore and interpret for themselves. This does not mean that people believe anything they want without reason, but they feel responsible for forming their own understanding. When applied to religion, this means that a person may study different beliefs, compare them, and decide what makes sense to them personally. In many cases, this process leads to a more skeptical or questioning attitude, especially if they find contradictions or lack of evidence. This skepticism can eventually lead to agnosticism or atheism, particularly if they do not find a belief system that fully satisfies their questions. At the same time, individualism does not always lead to atheism. In some cases, it leads to new forms of belief that are highly personalized. A person might believe in God, but reject organized religion, or they might combine ideas from different traditions to create their own spiritual path. However, even in these cases, the authority of traditional religion is reduced because the individual becomes the final decision maker. This shift from external authority to internal choice is one of the key reasons why secularism is growing. Religion is no longer the default option. It is one choice among many, and not everyone chooses it. Another important point is how individualism affects long-term commitment. Religion often requires regular practice, discipline, and sometimes sacrifice. In a culture that values flexibility and personal preference, maintaining such commitment can be challenging. People may start with good intentions, but gradually reduce their involvement as other priorities take over. For example, work, hobbies, travel, and social life may compete for time and attention. Without strong external pressure or internal motivation, religious practice can fade. Over time, this can lead to a complete shift in identity, where a person no longer sees themselves as religious. All of these factors show that individualism is not just a cultural trend. It is a deep transformation in how people see themselves and their place in the world. By giving individuals the power to choose their beliefs, it has opened the door to questioning, exploration, and in many cases, moving away from traditional religion. This does not mean that religion will disappear, but it does mean that it will continue to compete with many other ways of thinking and living. Another very important reason behind the gradual rise of secularism and atheism is the transformation of daily life itself, especially because of modern lifestyles, entertainment, and constant digital engagement. This factor may seem simple on the surface, but it has a deep and long-term impact on how people think, behave, and prioritize things like religion. In the past, life moved at a much slower pace. People had more structured routines that often included religious practices as a natural part of the day or week. For example, attending weekly gatherings, participating in community rituals, or following daily prayers was not just a personal choice, but part of the rhythm of life. There were fewer distractions, fewer alternatives, and more social reinforcement. Religion was woven into daily living in a way that felt normal and expected. But today, the situation is very different. Life has become faster, more demanding, and filled with endless options for how to spend time and attention. One of the biggest changes is the rise of digital technology. Smartphones, social media, streaming platforms, and online gaming have created a world where people are constantly connected and entertained. A person can wake up and immediately check messages, scroll through content, watch videos, or engage in online discussions. This continuous flow of information and entertainment takes up a large portion of mental space and time. As a result, activities that require focus, reflection, or discipline, including religious practices, may slowly lose priority. It is not always a conscious decision to leave religion, but rather a gradual shift where other activities fill the space that religion once occupied. For example, instead of attending a religious gathering, a person might choose to relax by watching content online or spending time on social media. Over time, these small choices add up and change habits. Another important aspect is how entertainment shapes thinking. Modern entertainment is not just about passing time. It also presents ideas, values, and perspectives. Movies, series, and online content often explore themes like individuality, freedom, questioning authority, and breaking traditions. When people consume this content regularly, it can influence how they see the world. For instance, a story that highlights a character challenging traditional beliefs and finding their own path can resonate with viewers and encourage similar thinking. This does not directly tell someone to reject religion, but it creates an environment where questioning and independence feel normal and even desirable. Over time, this can weaken the automatic acceptance of religious traditions. Work culture is another major factor. In many modern societies, people spend a significant amount of time focusing on their careers. Long working hours, competitive environments, and the pressure to succeed can make life very busy. When people are tired or stressed, they may not have the energy to engage in regular religious practices. Even if they still believe, their level of involvement decreases. For example, someone who once attended weekly gatherings may start skipping them due to work commitments. At first, it might feel temporary, but gradually it becomes a new normal. Religion moves from being a central part of life to something occasional or symbolic. This change in routine can eventually affect belief itself, because regular practice often reinforces faith, and without it, the connection can weaken. Urbanization also plays a role in this transformation. In large cities, life is more individual and less community-driven. People often live in apartments, interact with diverse groups, and follow different schedules. The strong community ties that once supported religious life are less visible. For example, in a small town, everyone might know each other and share similar beliefs, creating a sense of collective participation in religious activities. In a city, a person might not even know their neighbors, and there is less social pressure to follow certain practices. This independence can lead to more personal choice, but it can also result in less consistent religious engagement. Over time, this environment supports a more secular lifestyle. Another subtle but powerful factor is the way digital platforms provide instant answers and solutions. In the past, people might turn to religion for guidance on life's questions, such as meaning, purpose, or dealing with difficulties. Today, they might search online, watch motivational content, or follow self-help advice. There are countless videos, articles, and influencers offering guidance on happiness, success, relationships, and mental health. These sources often present ideas in a practical and relatable way, without referencing religion. As people find useful answers through these channels, they may rely less on religious teachings for guidance. This does not mean religion has no value, but it becomes one option among many rather than the primary source of wisdom. The concept of time itself has also changed. Modern life often feels rushed, with constant deadlines and responsibilities. Religion, which often requires slowing down, reflecting, and engaging in rituals, may feel out of place in such a fast-paced environment. For example, practices that require quiet time or regular commitment can be difficult to maintain when a person is constantly busy or distracted. As a result, even those who value religion may struggle to keep it as a regular part of their lives. Over time, this can lead to a gradual distancing, not because of strong disagreement, but because of lack of time and focus. Another important point is how online communities replace traditional ones. People now find connection through shared interests rather than shared beliefs. For example, someone might feel a strong sense of belonging in a gaming community, a professional network, or a social media group. These communities provide interaction, support, and identity, which were once strongly associated with religious groups. When people find belonging elsewhere, the need for religious community decreases. This does not eliminate belief, but it changes the role religion plays in providing social connection. All these factors show that modern lifestyle is not directly attacking religion, but it is reshaping how people live in a way that naturally reduces its central role. The constant presence of digital content, the demands of work, the pace of life, and the availability of alternative sources of meaning all contribute to a gradual shift towards secular thinking. It is important to understand that this change is often slow and unintentional. Many people do not wake up one day and decide to become atheist. Instead, they slowly drift away as their habits, priorities, and environment change. Over time, this drift can lead to a completely different way of seeing the world. One of the most important and sensitive shifts happening in the modern world is how people understand morality, meaning what is right and wrong, what is good behavior, and how humans should treat each other. For a very long time, religion was seen as the main source of morality. People believed that moral rules came from God, and that without religion, society would lose its sense of right and wrong. This idea was very strong because religious teachings often provided clear guidelines about honesty, kindness, justice, family life, and social behavior. In many communities, being a good person was closely connected to being a religious person. But in today's world, this connection is changing, and this change is one of the key reasons why secularism and atheism are growing. Many people now believe that morality can exist without religion, and that human beings can develop ethical systems based on reason, empathy, and shared values rather than divine commands. To understand this shift, we need to look at how people experience morality in everyday life. For example, most people feel that hurting others without reason is wrong, helping someone in need is good, and being honest is important. These feelings often come naturally, even in people who do not follow a religion. This leads to an important question. If people can understand right and wrong through empathy and social experience, then is religion necessary for morality? This question does not have a simple answer, but it has influenced many people to rethink the role of religion in their lives. One major influence on this change is the development of human-centered philosophies. Ideas about human rights, equality, and justice are now often discussed in a secular way, meaning they're based on the value of human well-being rather than religious authority. For example, the belief that all humans deserve equal rights regardless of gender, race, or background is widely accepted in many parts of the world. These ideas are supported by international agreements and organizations like the United Nations, which promote human dignity and fairness without relying on any single religion. When people see that large systems of ethics and law can function without being tied to a specific religious framework, it changes how they view the necessity of religion for moral guidance. Another important factor is the role of empathy and psychology. Modern research in human behavior shows that people are naturally capable of empathy, which means understanding and caring about the feelings of others. This ability helps individuals develop moral behavior even without religious instruction. For example, a child may feel bad after hurting someone and learn to avoid such actions in the future, not because of religious teaching, but because of emotional understanding. As people learn more about psychology and human development, they may start to see morality as something that grows from human nature and social interaction rather than being imposed from outside. This perspective can reduce the perceived need for religion as the only source of ethics. There's also the influence of legal systems. In modern societies, laws are usually created through democratic processes and are designed to protect people and maintain order. These laws often reflect shared human values rather than specific religious rules. For example, laws against theft, violence, and discrimination are based on the idea of fairness and safety. When people see that society can function with laws that are not directly based on religion, they may feel that morality can be maintained in a secular framework. This does not mean religion has no role in shaping values, but it shows that it is not the only source. Another important aspect is the way moral debates are handled today. In the past, many moral questions were answered through religious teachings, and those answers were often seen as final. Today, people are more likely to discuss and debate ethical issues openly. Topics like equality, personal freedom, and social justice are explored through dialogue, research, and different perspectives. This process encourages critical thinking and allows for change over time. For example, attitudes towards certain social issues have evolved in many societies, sometimes moving away from traditional religious interpretations. When people see that moral understanding can develop and adapt, they may become less dependent on fixed religious rules. Instead, they may trust human reasoning and collective discussion to guide ethical decisions. Another reason for this shift is the desire for inclusivity. In a diverse world where people follow many different religions or none at all, it can be difficult to base morality on one specific belief system. A secular approach to ethics allows for a common ground where people of different backgrounds can agree on basic principles like respect, fairness, and compassion. This is especially important in global and multicultural societies. For example, in a workplace with people from different religions and cultures, it is more practical to follow shared ethical guidelines rather than one religious code. This encourages the idea that morality can be universal without being tied to a single religion. There's also a growing concern among some people that religion can sometimes be used to justify harmful behavior. While many religious teachings promote peace and kindness, there have been situations where beliefs are interpreted in ways that support discrimination or conflict. When people see such examples, they may become cautious about relying solely on religion for moral guidance. Instead, they may prefer systems that are based on human rights and equality, which they see as more consistent and inclusive. This does not mean all religion leads to harm, but it influences how some individuals evaluate its role in ethics. At the same time, it is important to recognize that many people still find strong moral guidance in religion and continue to live ethical lives based on their faith. The shift we are discussing does not mean morality is disappearing, but rather that its foundation is changing for some people. They are moving from a system where morality is given by religious authority to one where it is developed through human understanding and shared values. This transition can lead to secularism or atheism, especially if a person no longer feels that religion is necessary for living a good and meaningful life. All of these factors show that the relationship between religion and morality is evolving. As people gain confidence in their ability to understand and practice ethics without relying entirely on religious teachings, the role of religion becomes less central for some individuals. This change is one of the key reasons why secularism and atheism are spreading, especially in societies where education, diversity, and open discussion are common. One of the strongest forces pushing the growth of secularism and atheism today is generational change, which means that younger generations are thinking, living, and believing very differently compared to their parents and grandparents. This shift is not happening randomly. It is the result of all the factors we discussed earlier coming together and becoming stronger with each new generation. What makes this especially important is that beliefs are not only personal, they are also passed down. When a new generation adopts a different way of thinking, it slowly reshapes the entire society over time. To understand this clearly, imagine a chain where each generation influences the next. In the past, religion was passed down very strongly within families. Parents taught their children not only the beliefs, but also the practices, rituals, and importance of faith. Children grew up seeing religion as a normal and essential part of life. Even if they had doubts, social pressure, and limited alternatives often kept them within the system. But today, this chain is weakening. Many parents themselves are less strict about religion compared to previous generations, and as a result, children grow up with more freedom to explore and question. This creates a cycle where each new generation becomes slightly less religious than the one before. One of the biggest reasons for this change is the environment in which younger generations are growing up. They are surrounded by technology, global communication, and access to information from a very early age. A teenager today can learn about different religions, scientific ideas, philosophical arguments, and personal stories from around the world within minutes. This level of exposure shapes their thinking in a way that is very different from older generations who grew up with limited information. For example, a young person might watch videos discussing atheism, agnosticism, or different belief systems and start thinking about questions that previous generations may never have considered. This early exposure to diverse ideas makes them more open to questioning and less likely to accept beliefs without understanding them. Education also plays a major role in generational change. Younger generations generally have higher levels of education and are encouraged to think critically. Schools and universities often promote discussion, analysis, and independent thinking. Students are taught to examine evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and form their own conclusions. This mindset naturally extends to religion as well. When a young person applies critical thinking to religious beliefs, they may start asking questions about origins, contradictions, or relevance in modern life. Some find answers that strengthen their faith, but others may feel that the answers are not satisfying, leading them towards secularism or atheism. Another important factor is changing social norms. In many parts of the world, it is now more acceptable to say that you are not religious. In the past, openly identifying as atheist or non-religious could lead to strong social rejection. Today, especially in more open societies, it is becoming normal. This change reduces fear and allows more people to express their true beliefs. For example, surveys in countries like the United States show that younger people are much more likely to identify as having no religion compared to older age groups. When young people see their peers openly discussing and accepting non-religious identities, it creates a sense of normalcy. This social acceptance plays a big role in shaping belief patterns. There's also the influence of role models and public figures. Many well-known individuals, including scientists, writers, and influencers, openly discuss their views on religion, including skepticism or atheism. When younger generations see successful and respected people who do not follow religion, it challenges the idea that faith is necessary for a meaningful or successful life. This can be very influential, especially when combined with personal experiences and education. Another key point is how values are changing across generations. Younger people often place a strong emphasis on values like equality, freedom, and personal choice. When they feel that certain religious teachings conflict with these values, they may struggle to reconcile the difference. For example, If a young person strongly believes in gender equality or freedom of expression, but perceives their religion as restrictive in these areas, they may start to distance themselves. This does not always lead to atheism, but it can weaken their connection to organized religion. Over time, this distance can grow into a more secular outlook. Family structure and upbringing are also changing. In many cases, parents today are less strict about enforcing religious practices. They may encourage their children to think for themselves rather than follow rules. It is now more acceptable to say that you are not religious. In the past, openly identifying as atheist or non-religious could lead to strong social rejection. Today, especially in more open societies, it is becoming normal. This change reduces fear and allows more people to express their true beliefs. For example, surveys in countries like the United States show that younger people are much more likely to identify as having no religion compared to older age groups. When young people see their peers openly discussing and accepting non-religious identities, it creates a sense of normalcy. This social acceptance plays a big role in shaping belief patterns. There's also the influence of role models and public figures. Many well-known individuals, including scientists, writers, and influencers, openly discuss their views on religion, including skepticism or atheism. When younger generations see successful and respected people who do not follow religion, it challenges the idea that faith is necessary for a meaningful or successful life. This can be very influential, especially when combined with personal experiences and education. Another key point is how values are changing across generations. Younger people often place a strong emphasis on values like equality, freedom, and personal choice. When they feel that certain religious teachings conflict with these values, they may struggle to reconcile the difference. For example, if a young person strongly believes in gender equality or freedom of expression, but perceives their religion as restrictive in these areas, they may start to distance themselves. This does not always lead to atheism, but it can weaken their connection to organized religion. Over time, this distance can grow into a more secular outlook. Family structure and upbringing are also changing. In many cases, parents today are less strict about enforcing religious practices. They may encourage their children to think for themselves rather than follow rules. Without understanding, while this approach supports independence and critical thinking, it also means that children may not develop strong religious habits. Without regular practice and reinforcement, belief can become weaker over time. For example, if attending religious gatherings is optional rather than expected, many young people may choose not to participate regularly. This gradual reduction in practice can eventually lead to a shift in identity. Another interesting aspect of generational change is how quickly ideas spread among young people. Through social media and online platforms, trends and perspectives can reach millions within a short time. Discussions about religion, atheism, and secular values are widely available and often presented in engaging ways. Young people are more likely to engage with this content, share it, and discuss it with others. This creates a rapid exchange of ideas that accelerates change. What might have taken decades in the past can now happen within a few years. As a result, generational shifts are happening faster than ever before. It is also important to note that once a generation becomes less religious, the effect is long-lasting. Many studies show that people who grow up without strong religious beliefs are less likely to adopt religion later in life. This means that the changes we see today are likely to continue into the future. Each new generation starts from a different baseline, often with less attachment to traditional religion than the one before. This creates a steady movement toward more secular societies, especially in regions where these trends are strongest. At the same time, this does not mean that religion will disappear completely. In many parts of the world, younger generations still remain religious, and in some cases, they even become more committed as a way of preserving identity. However, overall, the global pattern shows that younger people are more open to secular and non-religious ways of thinking. This generational shift is one of the most powerful drivers of change because it shapes the future. As younger generations grow older, and take on roles in society. Their beliefs and values influence culture, policy, and social norms. All of these factors together show that generational change is not just a small trend. It is a major transformation that is gradually reshaping how people think about religion, belief, and meaning in life. In the next part, we will explore whether this trend towards secularism and atheism will continue in the future, or if there are signs that religion might adapt and regain influence in new ways. Now that we have explored the many factors driving secularism and atheism, education, science, globalization, individualism, modern lifestyles, morality, and generational change, it is time to bring everything together and look at the big picture, because understanding this helps us see where humanity is heading in terms of belief and meaning. All the changes we discussed are connected. They form a chain reaction. People are exposed to more ideas, encouraged to think independently, able to live more securely, and have access to tools and communities that support questioning and exploration. Each of these factors strengthens the others. For example, education teaches critical thinking, which makes exposure to diverse beliefs more impactful. Modern lifestyles create time pressures and distractions, which makes strict religious practices harder to maintain. Individualism encourages people to follow what feels true for them rather than inherited authority. Together, these forces create a society where religion is optional rather than mandatory, flexible rather than fixed, and questioned rather than accepted blindly. One strong conclusion we can draw is that secularism and atheism are not just about rejecting God or disbelief. They're part of a broader cultural shift. People are redefining meaning, morality, and identity in ways that are less dependent on inherited systems. Many still seek spirituality, purpose, and ethical guidance, but they look for these outside traditional religious institutions, often through personal exploration, science, philosophy, or social values. Another conclusion is that this trend is likely to continue, especially in societies where education, economic stability, and access to information are widespread. Each new generation grows up with more exposure to ideas, more freedom to question, and less social pressure to conform. This creates a compounding effect. The future may see even higher numbers of people identifying as secular, atheist, or spiritual but not religious. At the same time, it is important to understand that this does not mean religion will disappear entirely. In some parts of the world, religious practice remains strong and even grows, particularly where economic and social conditions make religion central to identity and community. Religion is adaptable. Historically, it has changed in response to cultural, social, and intellectual shifts, and it may continue to do so in the future. For instance, many religious movements today emphasize personal spirituality, social justice, or integration with modern science, showing that religion can evolve while maintaining relevance. Another key takeaway is the human need for meaning and connection. Even as secularism grows, people continue to seek purpose, belonging, and moral guidance. Secular societies often create alternative systems through education, community groups, ethical organizations, and online networks that meet these needs without relying on traditional religious frameworks. This shows that the core desire behind religion does not disappear. It simply finds new expressions. Finally, the spread of secularism and atheism teaches us about freedom of thought. The modern world allows individuals to explore ideas, question authority, and make personal choices about what they believe. This freedom is a central feature of human development and social progress. People can engage deeply with belief, doubt, and meaning without fear, and this creates a more thoughtful, reflective, and diverse society. In conclusion, the rise of secularism and atheism is the result of a complex web of cultural, social, intellectual, and technological changes. It reflects humanity's evolving relationship with knowledge, authority, identity, and morality. Rather than being a sudden rejection of religion, it is a gradual and ongoing transformation in how people understand the world, themselves, and the meaning of life. While the role of religion may diminish in some places and persist in others, the broader trend shows a move toward personal choice, critical thinking, and exploration of meaning outside traditional frameworks. This is one of the most significant cultural shifts of our time, and it is shaping the world in ways that will continue to unfold for generations to come. Think about it. Today, every young person with a phone, internet access, and freedom to explore ideas is stepping into a world of infinite possibilities. The questions they ask, the beliefs they form, and the communities they join are shaping a future where faith is no longer inherited by default, but chosen, challenged, and transformed. Secularism and atheism are not just statistics. They are reflections of curiosity, independence, and the human desire to understand life on our own terms. For audiences watching this, the takeaway is simple. The world is changing faster than ever, and understanding why people think the way they do gives us insight into the future of culture, morality, and meaning itself. It's not just about religion. It's about how humans navigate the questions of existence, purpose, and truth in the 21st century.